بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And welcome to our first session of our class, Islamic Family Law. This class is a part of the broader fiqh al-Islami, Islamic jurisprudence. And I know some of you have taken the course Islamic Law in the previous years. So this class, inshallah, will be a continuation of Islamic law, but we will, inshallah, focus on Islamic family law, the family laws that Islam has introduced, the rulings and the verdicts, the jurisprudential verdicts of Islam. We will not be using a specific book for our class. In fact, those that are tuning in on Zoom, you can see the slides and that will be as a guide for you. And for the in-person students, I have sent the file, you can see it in the group, of the outline of today's class, inshallah. And then hopefully in the following weeks, we can use the projector. So inshallah, we will begin our class of jurisprudence, the laws of family. Now, as you all know, forming a family in Islam through marriage and having children is very important. And it is an integral part of Islam. And at the same time that it's important, what we also have to understand is that it's an area that is susceptible to many complications, disputes and problems. And that's why the branch of Islamic family law, as we call it, fiqh al-usra, fiqh al-a'ila, is very important. It's a very important and integral part of Islamic jurisprudence. And learning the rights and duties, for example, of the husband and the wife, is crucial, according to Islam, in having a healthy and functioning family. If we find many problems that are arising in families, Islam believes that most of the times the reason is because people don't understand the different laws and duties, the different duties and the rights that spouses have, that kids have, that parents have. And that's why we have dysfunctional marriages and so many issues that rise. So Islam believes that if you learn these laws and apply them, the chances of having a healthy marriage and a healthy family is much, much more. So this is just as a prerequisite to highlight the importance of family in Islam. And because having a family is very important, then the laws of how to run that family and how to live in that family are also going to be very important. Sometimes, you have certain chapters of jurisprudence, maybe they're not that important because people don't deal with them. Not everyone is going to be, going to have to deal with them throughout their lives. For example, Hajj. Maybe I never went to Hajj, will never go to Hajj. So even though Hajj is important, but it's not something that I have to deal with. Do I have to learn it? No. When I go to Hajj, I learn it. The laws of Islamic family is something that everybody is going to have to go through, and that's why we have to learn them. So in this class, inshallah, we will cover the different laws and rulings of the family. I'll go over the different opinions. If there is a mas'ala and a scenario, a ruling where there's more than one opinion between the contemporary scholars, I'll go over that. And I'll mention some simple arguments that serve as the basis for this ruling. So when a scholar says that this is halal, this is haram, this is wajib, what is the basis of that? Where is he getting that? We'll mention the verse, we'll mention the hadith so that it can become clear for us. And here I want to mention 2 points, brothers and sisters. Point number 1 is that remember what's the objective of this class. For those that are attending this class, what's the objective? The objective isn't just to know what's halal, what's haram. When is the marriage void? When is it not void? It isn't just to learn the laws. You want to learn the laws, you can open the book of your marja and learn them. Here, we want to go much deeper than that. We want to go over the different opinions. If there's more than one opinion, I want you to be aware of them. I want you to recognize them. I want you to be familiar that in this situation, in this mas'ala, for example, there's more than one opinion. That's number one. And number two, what's the arguments behind each opinion? So as Hawza students, our objective isn't just to know this is halal, haram, because many times there isn't a definitive answer. Remember, we don't know many times what is halal, haram. Allah knows. All we can do is we can say there's two opinions, three opinions between the fuqaha. And I will not choose one over the other. Remember, I will mention the different opinions. I will not choose one over the other. This is an academic discussion about family law. We're just trying to understand the different opinions and the basis of each opinion. So many times there isn't going to be a clear-cut answer. Why? Because scholars themselves have differed. Why have they differed? Because the evidence, the proof can go both ways, and we will see that. So this is your number one objective of this class, is that to understand the different opinions and to understand the basis of these opinions. And if any of you attended my class that I gave 2 years ago, Contemporary Islamic Law, this is exactly what I did. I would go over different rulings and I would mention the different opinions of scholars. This group of scholars believes this is haram. Why? Because of ABC. Group B believes that it is halal. Why? Because of ABC. Do we choose? Generally, I don't, because that's a much higher level when it comes to, actually going and choosing which side over the other. I don't want to delve into that. This is an introductory level of jurisprudence. So I will just go over the opinions and some simple arguments. This is point number one. Yes, sister. Yes, of course. Following the fatwa is completely different than this class. This class is just to increase your knowledge. That why is there disagreement when it comes to divorce issue? Why is there disagreement when it comes to this marriage issue? To the custody, who has custody of the child? So in this class, we shouldn't take what I say and then follow it. You have to follow your marja, of course. Each individual follows the marja. That's why I made a fine distinction between the objective of my class and to implement it. We're not necessarily going to implement and apply these rulings. This is an informational, academic setting. We're just trying to understand the different opinions and the rulings behind that, because we have become Hawza students. And this is what we do in the Hawza. We don't just give rulings. We show them the different opinions, and then we show them the arguments behind them. So they learn slowly how to learn to derive the laws, and they learn the basis of why there's a disagreement. So of course, like you said, we have to follow our marja. This is very important. So this is the first point that I wanted to mention. No, I'm sorry. The second point that I wanted to mention is that this branch of jurisprudence is very sensitive and controversial. Because some rulings, as you'll see, they may appear to be biased towards a specific gender, let's say. This accusation has been made by many that when it comes to family law, Islam is biased towards men. Some accuse Islam of being a misogynistic religion against women, anti-feminist. Remember, as Hawza students, we have to isolate ourselves from these emotional accusations. And we have to be objective. Don't be subjective. And what I mean by being objective is we have to look at the text. We have to look at the Quran and the Sunnah. And based on what they say, we issue the suitable fatwa. They say, in the Hawza, there's a famous statement where they say, نحن أصحاب الدليل أينما ما نميل. We are individuals in the Hawza that follow the dalil. We follow the proof wherever it takes us. Even if it takes us to a place where it's against my own desires and interests, so be it. Because our job is to follow the clues, to follow the proof, to follow the evidence wherever the evidence takes us. So now that we're Hawza students, we have to always remind ourselves of this, to be objective, isolate ourselves from, being emotional. Oh, and this isn't fair, and this isn't, this is against this gender. Unless it reaches a level where I believe this is ghulum, I truly believe this is dhulm, and no way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can ever say something like that. That's a different situation, but it's rarely that clear cut and reaches that level. So the rulings that we will go over, these are not opinions of the scholars so that we accuse them of being misogynistic. No, these scholars spent so many years trying to understand the Quran and the Sunnah. So when you ask the scholar, why did you say that the woman has to do this or that, the man has this right? It's not because he's a man and he wants more rights for men. This is an accusation that's, brought forward. No, it's because he tells you, well, this is my understanding from the Quran and the Sunnah. I wish it was otherwise, but you can't go against the Quran and the Sunnah just to please myself, just to please people. So this is a point that we have to understand. Scholars try their best to understand the text and they issue a ruling based on their objective understanding of the Quran and the Sunnah. Now, are scholars biased towards men, let's say? Intentionally, no. Intentionally being biased, no, because this would go against them being just. The ulama have to be just, they have to be pious. And the ulama that I know, that I've spent time with in the Hawza, all of them that I know, they are just, they're pious, and they fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So being biased for a gender, then this goes against being just, because you have to be objective and go wherever the proof shows you. So intentionally, no alim will be just. Let's say there are certain rights for a man can marry four, a woman can't. Why? He will tell you, this is what the Quran says. It's not in my hand. I'm just a messenger. I'm telling you what Allah wants. You don't like it, that's not, you shouldn't put it up with the marja. The marja is just like a messenger, like a mailman. You don't like the mail, you don't take it up with the mailman. This is his understanding of the Quran and the Sunnah. So is he intentionally being biased? No. This is a point we have to keep in mind when it comes to this class, because we're going to go over many masail that deal with gender, the wife, the husband, children, the difference between, boy, girl, and so on and so forth. No one is intentionally being biased. Now, could they unintentionally be influenced by their patriarchal environment? It's possible. It's possible because they grew up in an environment where it's all men, 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 and they control everything. This maybe could unintentionally sway their opinion, unintentionally. Is that possible? Yes. But do I think this is a valid accusation, a valid issue? No. Based on my research, no. I neither find them intentionally biased nor unintentionally. If you were to take a look at the sources, at the Quran, at the Sunnah, most of the times you would reach the same conclusion. Even if you disagree, at least you give that person the benefit of the doubt. Well, yes, you know what, it makes sense. I know where that person is coming from. Maybe I don't agree, but at least I understand where they're coming from. Many people will think like that. So this is a point, my friends, that we have to understand, that when it comes to these masail, we have to be objective and not be influenced by the movements, by the feminist movement and what they said and what the liberal movement said. Sometimes we may not like them, but the point is we have to follow the Quran and the authentic teaching of Ahlul Bayt. And this is what our ulama do. Their point is they see what the Quran says and the hadith that is authentic, wherever it may lead them. So now that we understand this point, let us go to the topics. What are the topics you can see in your phone? I have highlighted the topics that we will go over. What are the topics we will go over? 4 topics, 4 fundamental topics. Number 1, the laws of hijab. Now what does laws of hijab have to do with family? It has a lot to do with marriage. So that's why I will mention it as the first topic. So what are some things that we'll go over? Some things that we'll go over are the laws of sight, fiqh al-nazar they call it in Arabic. Which individuals you're allowed to see without a hijab. For a woman, which individuals does she have to cover herself? They call this the laws of sight, fiqh al-nazar. So we'll go over that. Number 2, who are your mahrams? Because in order to understand, who you're supposed to wear a hijab from and not, they, divide people into 2 groups, mahram and non-mahram. So who are your mahrams, your maharam, the individuals that me as a female, I have to wear hijab. Me as a male, I'm allowed to look at them versus non-mahram. Number 3, the types of mahram. And I'll go over this inshallah. There's 3 types of mahram. People that a woman does not have to wear hijab from. Three types of mahram. Who are they? Number four, kinship through breastfeeding. There's a way in which someone becomes your mahram, not because they're related to you, blood relations, but because of breastfeeding, al-rida'. We'll go over that, inshallah. And finally, the laws of hijab. What is the extent of hijab? Which body parts a female believer has to cover from males? We will go over all of that by giving the verses and the hadith to prove everything that we say, inshallah. So this is the first topic, the laws of hijab. Topic number two that we will go over is marriage, of course. This is probably the most fundamental and important part of family law, marriage. So what will we go over? Number one, the types of marriage. We know there's different types of marriage, like what? Permanent marriage, temporary marriage. What are the laws of permanent marriage and what are the laws of temporary marriage? Another topic we'll go over is the marriage contract, the aqd. What are the laws of the aqd? How do you do it? What are the conditions that are needed? Can you place conditions? Which conditions are acceptable, which are not? These are, inshallah, topics we will go over. Who are you allowed to marry versus who? There are certain individuals you're not allowed to marry. Some of them is common sense. We know your sister, you're not allowed to marry her, your mother. But some other examples, many times we don't know about them. And then we will go over the mahar, which is the dowry. What are the conditions of the mahar, and so on and so forth. And we will go over the nafaqa, the maintenance, the provisions that the husband has to provide for the wife. What's the extent, what's the laws and rulings of the nafaqa. And finally, the rights and duties of both the husband and the wife. There are certain rights that the husband has against his wife. There are certain rights that the wife has against her husband. We'll go over, inshallah, them. And what are the duties that each have towards the other. Now, when we say rights and duties, we speak about the wajib rights. There are some recommended, akhlaqi rights that are good to do, but you don't have to do them. That we don't mention it in fiqh usually, or we might go over them quickly. But what we will focus on is the wajib, the mandatory obligations, duties, and rights of each. So this is the second topic that we will go over, inshallah. Now,
don't do them, the wife or the husband, as sinful?
Yes, if we consider them as wajib, any going against any wajib is haram. So if we stated that this is one of the wajib duties upon the man or upon the woman, not doing them without a valid excuse would mean they're committing haram. And sometimes there's consequences for that. And we'll speak about that entire chapter called An-Nushuz. An-Nushuz is any time one of the two spouses do not do their obligations towards the other. There's consequences. We will go over, inshallah, nushuz. Topic number three, just to remind the Zoom watchers, if there's any questions, please feel free to raise your hand or you can just interrupt me right away. So the third topic, divorce. Inshallah, we all want to stay away from divorce, but it's something that many people have to deal with, and it's something halal. It's obviously not recommended, but it's halal to do it, to go through a divorce. So we'll go over the laws of divorce, how to do a divorce, what are the conditions of divorce, talaq. We'll go over that, inshallah. The types of divorce. There's many types of divorce that we will go over. Al-khul, for example, you have talaq ba'in, you have talaq raj'i, khul, and so on and so forth. We will go over those, and these are very important because many times we even see them in the communities happening. And finally, iddah, the time in which the wife, after she's divorced, she cannot remarry. There's a specific time called the iddah. What is the iddah period? What is she allowed to do? What is she not allowed to do? All the laws of iddah we'll go over. And finally, children. Anytime we speak about family, we're going to speak about the children. So there's certain laws that we want to go over. Topics like what? Birth control. Is birth control allowed in Islam or not? Using contraceptives. Is that okay? The different types of birth control. I did go over some of these topics in my class, Contemporary Islamic Law, but because they overlap with this class, I'll also go over them, inshallah, here. Another topic we'll go over is artificial insemination that's happening right now. They do them in certain, probably doctors' offices or labs. Artificially inseminate a woman to become pregnant. Is this halal? Is this haram? And the laws that pertain to that. Abortion. Abortion is something that is always spoken about especially here in the West. Is abortion halal? Is it haram? Are there exceptions? So on and so forth. Another topic, adoption. Is adoption allowed in Islam? What are the laws of the adopted child? The financial support. Is it wajib for the parents to spend on their children? Is it wajib for the children when they go to spend on their parents? We'll go over that. The financial support between the parents and their children. When is a child considered ibn halal? A legitimate child versus ibn haram. This is the fiqhi, the legal aspect. Sometimes when we're in a fight, we call someone ibn haram. This is just, this isn't technical. This isn't right. This is just a, way we're venting and we're just speaking negatively. But when we come to jurisprudence, no, there are certain instances where this person will be ibn zina. This person will be an illegitimate child. What are the laws of being illegitimate? Is it just a stigma? No, there's certain laws that pertain, consequences. We'll go over that, inshallah. We'll go over guardianship, al-wilaya. A father has guardianship over his children. What's the extent? Over his money, over the entire life matters of the child. What's the extent? Does only the father have wilaya? Does the mother have wilaya? We'll go over that, inshallah. And finally, custody. If there is divorce, who has custody of the child? This is a topic that we will go over, inshallah. So this is just a brief outline of our class this year. Laws of hijab. With the laws of hijab, let's begin with the laws of sight, the ahkam of an-nazar. The ulama, they divide every individual into one of two. Either that person is your mahram or ajnabi. Ajnabi means not mahram. So who's a mahram? A mahram is anyone that you can see, if I'm a male, that I can see without hijab. My mother, my sister, my daughter. We'll go over the list. This is called my mahram. If I can't see that person without hijab, that person is غير mahram or ajnabi. So remember the word ajnabi, غير mahram, na mahram, these are all the same meaning. So who is your mahram? Like I said, some of them we know, but we want to go over the complete list as outlined in the Quran and in the Sunnah. Who is your mahram? Your mahram is anyone, there's a general rule, memorize it. Anyone you are not allowed to marry, that person is your mahram. You're never allowed to marry that person. You can see that person without hijab. Am I allowed to marry my mother? No, that means she's my mahram, I can see her. My sister, no. My daughter, no. My aunt, no. Now, is there exceptions to this rule? Yes. Don't take it as a 100% rule. 80, 90%. There are some exceptions, meaning there are some individuals, you're not allowed to marry them, but you can't see them. I'll mention that, inshallah, when we go to marriage. Under the topic, who are we allowed to marry? There are some individuals, you're not allowed to marry them, but at the same time, you can't see them. They have to wear hijab from you. But those are exceptions. This rule, most of the time, it's true. If you can't marry them, most likely you can see them. That's really the only rule we can mention. Other than that, we just have to list them. How many types of mahram are there? The ulama state that there's 3 types of mahram. There's 3 ways in which someone can become your mahram. So the first way is through blood relationships, through family ties. Really, you can't do anything about it. You're born and you have mahram. That's the first group, like your mother, like your sister, your daughter. These are blood relationships. And they become your mahram from birth. The other way someone can become your mahram is through marriage. Like what? Like your wife, of course. Your wife is your mahram. Your husband is your mahram. Your mother-in-law, correct? Father-in-law. How did that person become my mahram? I was born with that? No. Because I said, قبلت ذلك, I accepted the marriage, I received a bunch of extras. It's not just your wife, a bunch of other individuals become your mahram automatically. So that's the second way. And the third way is through breastfeeding, through al-ridha'a. Through breastfeeding. If, for example, my mother breastfeeds a child for a certain amount of time that will go over, that person becomes my mahram. That girl becomes my sister. So it's ties through breastfeeding. So I can have I can have a biological sister, she's my mahram, and I can have a mahram through ridha'a. She's exactly like my real sister. I can see her without hijab. I'm not allowed to marry her, and so on and so forth. So let's begin with the blood relationships. How many mahrams do you have based on blood relationships? There's 7 altogether. In one verse in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions most of them. So if you see the slide in front of you, those on Zoom, and those of you in the class, you can see on your phones, you can see I have highlighted the verse. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَقُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنَاتِ. It's a long verse until Allah says, He tells the believing woman, وَلَا يُبْدِينَ زِينَتَهُنَّ. And let them not show their zina, meaning their beauty. Meaning, they cannot show their beauty. They have to wear hijab. Illa, except for these individuals. These individuals, they can show their beauty, meaning they don't have to wear hijab. These individuals are the mahram. Any person you don't have to wear hijab from, that person is your mahram. So Allah says, إِلَّا لِبُعُولَتِهِنَّ. بُعُولَتِهِنَّ does not go under blood relationship. That's part of the second, marriage relationships. أَوْ آبَائِهِنَّ. That's number 1, your parents. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah is speaking about the believing woman. So who's their mahram? Number 1, their father. And then أَوْ أَبْنَائِهِنَّ. I've underlined them. Your sons. أَوْ إِخْوَانِهِنَّ. Your brothers. أَوْ بَنِي إِخْوَانِهِنَّ. Your nephew. أَوْ بَنِي أَخَوَاتِهِنَّ. بَنِي إِخْوَان means your brother's son. Bani akhawat means your sister's son. Now in English, we call all of that nephew. But in Arabic, there's difference. Ibn al-akh or ibn al-ukhut. So there's, that's why the Quran mentions both of them. But in English, we just say nephew. So Allah mentions 4 here. Father, son, with respect to a female. Who's her mahram? Her father, son, brother, nephew. Now, there are certain mahrams not mentioned in this verse. So grandfather is not mentioned. Grandson is not mentioned. Your uncle, am and khal are not mentioned. We know these are your mahram, for sure. No one has denied them. There isn't even room for discussion because there's consensus between all Muslims. So why weren't they mentioned in the Quran, in this verse? There's many explanations. Some scholars said Allah didn't, chose not to mention all of them here. He's just mentioning some of them. Other scholars have mentioned some of these individuals that weren't mentioned. You can fit them under one of the categories. For example, when the Quran says Aba, your father, grandfather goes with that too. No, not uncle, grandfather. Because your grandfather is also kind of your father, especially in Arabic. In Arabic, even your grandfather is your father. And that's why the grandfather, we'll get to that, has wilaya over his grandson. If I have a grandson, of course, if it's the paternal grandfather, we'll get to that. I have wilaya, guardianship over my grandson. Even though guardianship is for parents, that means I'm kind of a parent. So they said that grandfather goes under Aba, the fathers. Likewise, grandson goes under your son. Now, why wasn't the uncle mentioned, al-am wal-khal? Some, they have said, am and khal goes under nephew too. Because if someone is your nephew, then you're their uncle, right? So it's both ways. So Allah doesn't have to mention both ways. It's enough just to mention one side of the relationship. If someone is my nephew, I'm their ammu, I'm their khalu, right? I'm their uncle. So if Allah says your nephew is mahram, it's common sense that your uncle will also be mahram. Some have said this, some haven't accepted this. They say no. Maybe the grandfather, grandson, yes, but the uncle, no. We need a more clear verse. Now, is there a verse that mentions the uncle is your mahram? Or for me as a man, my amma, my khala, my aunt is a mahram? There's no verse, there's no hadith. Why? Because it's so clear. No, it's so clear that the Imams didn't even have to address it. It's so clear that the Quran didn't have to address it. There is ijma'. What's the proof that my uncle is mahram? My aunt is mahram? Ijma'. There is consensus between all Muslims. Nobody has ever denied that. So if there is, ijma', consensus between all the scholars, this in itself is a form of proof and evidence. And this is taught in usul. If any of you took the class usul, it's taught in the class usul. Which sources can we use to prove a hukum? Quran, hadith, ijma'. We can use ijma'. This is when all the ulama agree on something. Also, we can rely on something else. The Imams of Ahlul Bayt themselves and the Rasulullah, through their actions, they showed that the uncle and the aunt is mahram. We have many stories. The Imam would go sit with his aunt. The aunt wouldn't wear hijab. Would the Imam do something haram? We have stories that, for example, some of the daughters of the Imams, they would go and sit with, with other members, with their uncle, with their khal or am. And if you read, for example, the story of Karbala, Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas and Sukayna, she wasn't, they say she was about 10, 11 years old, so she's over 9. And obviously, he treated her like his daughter, not someone that's not mahram. And so many stories that you can find, the Ahlul Bayt themselves, with the uncle and the aunt, they were okay. So this shows that it is okay, that it is a mahram. Now, something that many people probably comes from culture, they consider their cousin as mahram. Bint ammi, bint khali, my cousin. My female cousin is my mahram. Yeah, she doesn't have to wear hijab. I hug her, I kiss her. No. Islamically, this is wrong. Your cousin is like any other woman. She is ajnabi. Remember, you're either mahram or you're not mahram. There isn't a third. You can't fit the cousin in the middle. Some people, they have a middle. My brother's wife, in the middle, right? And I don't know, some other ajnabis, not mahrams, they create a separate group. She's not mahram, but she's not ajnabi. No, if she's not mahram, she's ajnabi. You have to treat her just like any other woman. I mean, dress modestly and act modestly with that individual. So cousin is not mahram, according to any marja. Then comes the marriage relationships. How does someone become mahram? We said 2 ways: blood relationship, number 2, marriage relationships. Who are those individuals? The verse we mentioned mentions 3 of them. Altogether, there's 5, but the verse we mentioned mentions 3. The verse mentions husband. إِلَّا لِبُعُولَتِهِنَّ. No hijab with your husband. If I'm a female, then my husband is my mahram. And then the Quran says, أو father-in-law. آباء بُعُولَتِهِنَّ. Your husband's father. And number 3 that the Quran mentions is the husband's son. If I marry someone that has children from another wife, then the sons of my husband will be halal, mahram. What does Allah say? أو أبناء بعولتهن. Your husband's son. And at the same time, the father's wife. Because remember, it's a 2-way relationship. If that person is my husband's son, then I am what? I am the father's wife. So if your father marries a lady, divorces my mom or a second wife, then she is halal upon you. Why? Because of this verse, أبناء بعولتهن. Even though it's mentioning this side, the son of your husband, but remember, we look at both sides of the equation. If someone is my husband's son, then that means I am the father's wife. So it's both ways. Is that clear? And then there's 2 mahrams that aren't mentioned in this verse. Mother-in-law. Father-in-law is mentioned. Mother-in-law is not mentioned. Why? Same reason. Some people will fit it with father-in-law. They say no difference. Some ulama say no, there's a difference. So mother-in-law is not mentioned. And number two, your wife's daughter. Remember we said husband, son? So if I'm a lady, I marry a man that's divorced, he has, or he's not divorced. He has a first wife, and I'm the second wife. He has a son, right? Then he's halal upon me. But what about the opposite? What if I'm a man, I marry a divorced woman that has a girl, and that girl is old? Is she mahram upon me? She's not my daughter, she's my wife's daughter. The ulama say she is mahram upon you. There's a condition. We'll get to that when we speak about which individuals you're not allowed to marry. There is a condition. That girl only becomes mahram if there has been intercourse between the man and the wife. Before the intercourse, she's still haram. She's still haram. I can marry her and I can't see her. After intercourse, she becomes halal. Why? This is how the Quran and the Ahadith mention it. So anyway, this isn't mentioned. The wife's daughter. Or put it the other way, the mother's husband. If his mother gets divorced, she marries another man. And it's a girl. Can she see that individual? This is not mentioned in the Quran. But like we said about the am, the khal, the grandpa, the grandma, the uncle, there is ijma' between all Muslims that your mother-in-law is halal, that your wife's daughter or the mother's husband is halal, even after that condition. So remember, some things they may not be explicitly mentioned in the Quran or the Sunnah, so we have to find other ways of proving that it is, proving the law. One way is through ijma'. And likewise, the acts of the imams and their mother-in-laws, they would not wear hijab, for example, from them. So we could use ijma', which is the consensus of the maraja, that no one has even, raised the question. This is something everybody, common sense, that your mother-in-law is halal, even though it's not mentioned in any verse, it's not mentioned in any hadith, that your mother-in-law is halal, meaning you can see her and not marrying her is mentioned in the Quran. But can you see her? This isn't mentioned, so it's common sense.
I marry a lady.
Okay.
She has a son, fully grown.
Okay, she has a son from another man. Okay.
I divorce her, I marry another lady.
Okay.
Can my son see the other lady or no? The second lady.
But you're not his father. No. No, because as long as she is the father's wife, she's halal. She's not the father's wife. It would be even hard to word it. She's the wife of his mother's past husband. Right? The wife of his mother's past husband. No, that would not be halal in that situation. Since he's not his father. He's his mother's ex. So that would not be halal. It has to be your actual biological father for that woman to be halal. What about stepchildren to each other? So if both people have kids and get married, are their kids mahram to each other? So let's say a man has a son and he marries a woman that has a daughter. Do they become mahram? No. Step brother, you have to share at least one of them. Yani, here you're not sharing neither the mom nor the dad. That person has a different mom, different dad. If at least one of them you share, then it's okay. So let's say his parents get divorced, and then his father marries and his mother marries. The child that comes of that, both of them will be there. They'll be mahram because they're siblings, even though one is just through the mother, one's just through the father. But in this situation, they're not related through their parents at all. There's no blood relation at all. It's only a marriage. So my father is married to someone else's mother. Me and that person, we have absolutely no connection. So it doesn't become halal. We're out of time, brothers and sisters. Inshallah, we will continue this topic next week. Thank you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad.